My name is Lex, and this week on Spidey Signals, me and my co-host Alex discuss how we met, our connection to Spider-Man, and how this show will work. Get ready, because it's time for Spidey Signals. Welcome to Spidey Signals, the podcast where two guys with the same name talk about Spider-Man movies. I'm Lex.
And I'm Alex.
This is the first episode of our show. It's our sort of introductory, preliminary episode.
The first and only podcast about Spider-Man.
the first, you know, we've been looking at the podcast market and we're thinking, there's no podcast about Spider-Man, so we're
Not
going in.
Not enough white guys in their 20s talking about Spider-Man on the internet.
Not enough.
This is what's going to save 2020.
We're cornering the market on this. So this is not an actual episode covering a movie. We're going to just sort of talk about how we met, why we wanted to do this show. But next week, hopefully, we should have our first episode recorded and ready to go about the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. But yeah, that's the pitch for this show. We're going to talk about all of the Spider-Man movies, from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man to the last movie we're going to do is Into the Spider-Verse, but we will cover Far From Home, even though that came afterwards. And maybe later on, we'll add in more episodes for whatever movies come out in the future. So, Alex, how did we meet?
Well, if I'm not completely mistaken, we met on the wonderful blogging site known as Tumblr.
Fucking, how long was it? It was like 6 years ago? 2014?
6 or 7, yeah. That would have been, give or take, my senior year of high school or slightly before.
Yeah, I think I was a freshman in high school by that point.
I am at the elderly, tender age of 24.
And I just turned 21 on the 3rd of November. This is being recorded on the 5th. I think we met. I think I initiated the conversation because I saw that your Tumblr URL at the time was Pharrell's hat, and I thought it was really funny.
2013, there was not much going through my mind that did not have to do with random access memories.
Of course.
This is a Spider-Man podcast. I will briefly talk about Daft Punk and try not to get too into it. I had a lifelong fascination with them, starting around the Toonami era. It kind of waned somewhere around 2010, but 2013 hit me like a truck, and absolutely everything that I was involved in at the time was just, okay, how can I squeeze Daft Punk into this today? I had a URL for about maybe 2 years before that. I saw Pharrell's hat was open, and I was like, all right, this is good meme value. I'm gonna be Pharrell's hat for a while, and here we are, all these years later.
We have a surprising amount of commonalities between the stuff that we like. We both really like They Might Be Giants, Talking Heads. I haven't watched Twin Peaks. I know you're really into that.
Oh, yeah, I like most of David Lynch's stuff. I won't say most of it's good, but I will say I like most of it.
I think I've seen quite a few David Lynch movies, but the only one that I could say that I really enjoyed was probably Blue Velvet.
Yeah, that's a very, very good one. Until he makes a Spider-Man movie.
Until David Lynch makes a Spider-Man movie. I saw somebody did on Instagram, somebody had made a fan art of Kyle MacLachlan as Spider-Man. I think this was right after Dune, when David Lynch was being prepped as this big Hollywood superstar.
I would buy MacLachlan as a Future Foundation era, something like that.
He would definitely work.
Maybe a little too handsome, but there's a precedent for that already.
There's a precedent for that. We'll get into that. But let's talk about how we got into Spider-Man, I guess.
You feel free to go first.
Sure. Well, the earliest movie I can remember going to see in the theater, this is going to overlap with one of our upcoming episodes. The first movie I can remember seeing in the theater was Spider-Man 2 when I was 4 years old. I remember seeing Spider-Man 2 and thinking it was the best thing ever. I really loved Spider-Man when I was a kid, and then I sort of fell out of it for a really long time. And then two events really got me back into it. It was when Civil War came out and they put him in the MCU, and I'm like, now I had to pay attention to these movies because I didn't really give a shit until that point. I was like,
Absolutely.
oh, I gotta pay attention to these now. Okay.
Oh shit, these
Uh,
are good, you know.
oh fuck. It's that meme where it's is Spider-Man in it? No, then I'm not interested.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I don't give a shit. And then 2 years ago there was the PS4 game came out, and that
Oh
was
yeah.
really the big. My freshman year of college was in 2018, and I don't know. It was sort of that game was all. Not only is that game really good, it gave me something to like focus on and look forward to. And it's all gone downhill from here. I've become essentially a one-trick pony. All, people, I just, it's always about the Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's one thing I've mentioned to people when like I've briefly mentioned, oh yeah, I'm starting a podcast with my friend Lex because we're both respectively the biggest Spider-Man dorks in our respective circle of friends, and it gets just about the same reaction every time of, oh yeah, yeah, nice, good for you guys.
good, yeah, good for you. Yeah. When I got my birthday gifts this year, most of them were Spider-Man related, and I'm like, am I really that predictable?
That's been my entire life with
I'm like, I have other interests.
predominantly. Most of my family just thinks, oh, we'll just give Alex some crap of Star Wars on it. In the back of my head, I'm like, not in 2020, my friend. Not this. Not now.
Not Star Wars is a whole different fucking can of worms.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's
Someone should start a Star Wars podcast one day.
maybe somebody should be the first person to make us podcast about Star Wars. Somebody should do it. But yeah, do you have a detailed story like that, Alex?
Somewhat, yeah. My history with Spider-Man predates most of my other histories with franchises. Spider-Man 1, the Raimi original classic, was the first DVD I ever owned.
The
My dad got
DVD.
it. Yeah, my dad got it for me when I was 6 years old, something like that, maybe 7. But I
Hell
remember
yeah.
it was my first non-VHS movie, and I was like, "This is incredible! It's modern. It's Spider-Man. It's phenomenal." Um, Shortly thereafter, once like Spider-Mania had taken hold of my young brain, I distinctly remember
Yes.
I went out of my way to look this up, like to look up the covers earlier to see which one this was. I was maybe 8 or 9. My mom had taken me to the mall to get a new pair of shoes at JCPenney, and they gave me, with the shoes, a free issue of Ultimate Spider-Man number 8. Um, and that's specifically in that issue. I think the Shocker in the Ultimate Universe is introduced. Peter has like this really vivid nightmare about Uncle Ben's murder, and I just remember reading it, being like, "This is a comic book. Oh my god, this is brutal. This is great. I love this." I thoroughly enjoyed it. From there, literally maybe a week later, I was at Toys R Us with my parents again, buying either a Christmas or a birthday present for my cousin. And for some reason, I've never been able to explain this or find anyone that knew about it. But for some reason, for a brief period of time, Toys R Us would sell essentially a plastic bag with 4 random comic books in it for dirt cheap. And I picked one of those at random, and it had 2 Spider-Man comics in it. It had, I looked this up as well, Amazing Spider-Man 362, which is part of the Carnage versus Venom arc, where they go to like that island or whatever, and the Human Torch is there. It's a fun one. It also had an issue of this thing called Spider-Man Saga. It was a 4-part, like, hey, here's everything that's ever happened in Spider-Man up to like 1991, kind of like greatest hits kind of thing. And I remember reading that thing until it like completely fell apart. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I ended up buying the other 3 parts online just to like ease that little itch in the back of my head. Like, okay, I've got 4. But for a good chunk of my life, Spider-Man stuff just kind of fell into my lap. It's I've always, like most dudes our age, Peter Parker, I find to be a very relatable character. I've always admired the things that the character stands for. Tim Bagley's art specifically on Ultimate Spider-Man is what really drew me in. which I think was kind of the point because
Yeah.
I think Ultimate was launched very shortly after the Raimi movie came out to try to get younger kids into comics and specifically Spider-Man comics. It worked like a damn charm on me.
I think Ultimate was like a little bit before. It just happened to be like really serendipitous. I think maybe they started it because the film rights had been bought up.
Something like that. It coincided.
Something like that. It was very. They did the same thing when they relaunched Ultimate. They launched with I think Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and X-Men, and Spider-Man and X-Men had just like started a really big movie franchises. They still can't get Fantastic Four to work.
One day, maybe.
Maybe someday.
I distinctly remember being Spider-Man for second grade Halloween, which would be give or take about the time Spider-Man 2 came out. I did not see 1 in the theater, but I did see 2 and 3. And I remember thinking as well that 2 was like, wow, nothing will ever top this. That was incredible. I didn't do like the Shrek walk on the way out of the theater, you know what I mean? But I distinctly remember like, wow, that was a marvel. That was something.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of experience with reading the comics, but I never read the Ultimate stuff. I had like an issue or two of Ultimate Fantastic Four, but most of the comics that I read when I was a kid were the Lee Ditko run.
Oh, yeah.
I've never actually finished the whole Lee Ditko run. I have the Ultimate collection of all of them, but in like 2000, I'm reading it right now online. In 2006, they had like a thing in the Sunday paper where they would start including reprints of Lee Ditko issues, but they'd split them in half. So like you'd get like half of the first half of the issue, and then you get the other half. And I had the first volume, which went all the way up to issue number 11 for the Lee Ditko run, and I read those all the time. They were like really shitty newspaper quality paper. They just were awful.
I think I might have either had something like that, or I distinctly remember it wasn't with the newspaper, with local like advertiser in my town.
Yes.
They would include like a 6-inch by maybe 7-inch little mini Spider-Man comic, always from the Lee Ditko run, and it was always in like black and white when they were originally printed in color. And I was like, how is it 2007, 2008? We're reprinting color comics in black and white, but whatever. I read it.
Yeah, I read those. It's not even like the really super good. It's not even the Master Planner saga. Like If This Be My Destiny, the one where the big rubble is on top of him.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like that issue. It's like the first 10 where it's like kind of weird in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It is also super cool because Lee and Ditko introduced like a majority of Spider-Man's mainstay villains in that run.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say like the very earliest issues, like you get Vulture and Sandman pretty much like right out of the way.
You get Vulture and you get Sandman. You get Dr. Octopus's issue 3. They banged him out. Usually with lots of comic runs, they have it takes them a really long time to like build up a rogues gallery. But with Spider-Man, it was like everything was there already. I don't think there's been a movie that they haven't used a villain created by Lee and Ditko.
Yeah, whatever method Lee and Ditko were using of throwing darts at a board and Animal and Man, it was working.
Animal and Man.
It sure worked, man.
it did something. But let's move on and talk about the structure of the show.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is we're gonna have an episode a week out. So I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but from the day that this episode comes out, which is our introduction, our episode 0, the next week we're gonna have the first Raimi Spider-Man movie, and then the second, and then the third, and then for the 4th episode, we're gonna do a sort of recap of the Raimi trilogy, and talk about what could have been for Spider-Man 4, which I think is going to be really interesting.
Oh yeah, that one of the great cinematic what ifs.
I still see people retweeting that older Sony tweet where it's like Spider-Man 4 will come out. Yeah. It's so sad.
Yeah, in another timeline, in another world, we're about to go sit down and watch Spider-Man 7 somewhere.
Maybe someday. And then we're going to move on to the Amazing Spider-Man duology, and then episode 7 we're going to recap the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and then also watch Captain America Civil War, which will be fun. I haven't seen Civil War since like the theater.
Oh, I think I've seen it once or twice post. It's not a bad one.
No, it's not, but I have rewatched those Spider-Man scenes multiple times because they're good.
I bet you have.
Then we're going to watch Homecoming, and then we're going to watch Infinity War and Endgame together as one episode because Spider-Man's not in it very much, but still, it's important for what's coming next. Then we're going to talk about Far From Home. Then we're going to recap the MCU movies and speculate on what might be coming next. Apparently, we're going to get some kind of look at the third Spider-Man movie in December. I don't know, but maybe we can get some speculation in before that. And then after that, for our last episode of the season, I guess, before we go into semi-hiatus, we're going to cover Into the Spider-Verse. So that is going to be really exciting.
Indeed, it is.
We don't know about guests. We'll ask closer to the. I have some ones planned in my head. As I get closer, I'll ask them and see if they're up for it. But we might have a guest. We might not. We'll see what happens.
I have managed to think of at least one or two people that might work for that kind of thing as well, that I know are cool with this kind of thing, so that I have maybe one or two on deck as well.
To be determined. But where did I put it? Yeah. So the segments. We're going to have segments to block it out. Just sort of a basic intro. And then I'm going to cover the facts of the movie, who directed it, who's in it, reviews from people at the time, box office, stuff like that. And then we're going to talk about our personal experiences with the movie, what we sort of felt about it at the time, if we saw it in the theater at all. And Alex is going to do the next two segments, which are
both plot and fun facts. I'll do my best to give a concise and mostly accurate and unbiased telling of the events of the movie as best I possibly can. Anybody that knows me in real life knows that I have really no life outside of useless movie trivia. I am a big fan of perusing the IMDb trivia tab. I hear things and they don't leave my brain. I can't tell you a lot about like real world history or economics or anything like that, but I can tell you a lot about like, oh, hey, did you know Bruce Campbell was supposed to be Mysterio? That kind of stuff.
Ratings and rankings. Once we cover the plot and the fun facts, we're going to have our own rating system. We're going to use stars like people do on Letterboxd. So it's a 5-star system, but there are half stars, so it's an out of 10 ranking. So we'll give it both a star and a number. And then as the movies sort of progress, we'll end up ranking which movies are our favorites. And we can rank other stuff too, villains, costumes, whatever we want to do. We're going to free associate it, jazz it out.
The Wild West of podcasts.
That's us. We're flying by the seat of our pants. After that, if anybody wants to send us DMs on our Twitter account, at Spidey Signals on Twitter, or if you want to shoot us an email, spideysignalspodcast@gmail.com. We'll read those out. We'll go back and forth. We'll talk about it. We'll have a good time. And then that'll be it for the show. So, yeah. Do you have anything else to say, Alex?
Not off the top of my head, except that I'm very much looking forward to getting this done. This is my first foray into seriously doing a podcast. I'm sure it'll show over the course of it. Just know that I'm very excited. I don't often get a chance to talk about the things specifically like Spider-Man that I'm passionate about in depth on this kind of level. I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to be a part of this.
It's also my first podcast. Before I go, I do want to make some recommendations of podcasts that have personally inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
There's one called Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About Comics. Their first season, they talked about the Lee Ditko run of Spider-Man, which was really fantastic. They talk about other comics now, but that first season was really good. And the other podcast is called 70 Millimeter. I actually support them on Patreon. They're another really great movie podcast that have great artwork, great camaraderie between the hosts. But yeah, I think that's it. thank you for listening to this introductory episode to our podcast. Things will probably shift and change. I know Alex is getting a new microphone for the next episode. We just wanted to get this out there. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you've got a question or a comment that you want us to read on next week's episode, which will again be Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002, be sure to send it to us at our email address, spideysignalspodcast@gmail.com, or shoot us a DM on our Twitter at spideysignals. So yeah, until then, stay responsible. Bye.
Take it easy.